What's happening, gang? Back live in the secret stash, tracking down some cool local people. Talking about some important and I'll say timely local stuff. Leaving you a little better than how we found you. I'm hanging out in studio with my man, Stephen Wendroff. And Steve can be tracked down at stevewcpa.com. You want to write down his number in case this or any of the other two segments before have sparked a chord with you. Year-end tax planning with the best. It's 619-295-2637. And I would invite you to include yourself in this conversation as well. You can call in live at 866-405-1717. And my man, Engineer Steve, in there will get you primed up and queued and get your question answered live. And we're also streaming this whole thing live right over now on our Twitter handle at Follow the Stash. You can tweet a question live as well. So, Steven, hash through the business game. Did a solid on the personal game. Now let's go future pace this, okay? So what about budgeting and setting goals for the new calendar year? What you got for us, my man?
Oh, very good. So again, we talked about 2015 tax planning, savings for business and individuals. One of the most important things you could do at this time of year is take a look at your own financial situation and basically do a quick analysis for yourself. You know, the best thing you could do is you could set up budgets for 2016. You know, we've had lots of experience where it doesn't matter if you're making $1 million a year or $50,000 a year, people need some control, some borders. You know, basically some people need behavior modification.
Some, Stephen? And I'll tell you what's funny about that, too, is, so everybody's heard the old analogy, right, that money is an amplifier. Or if you haven't, then this is a fundamental tenet, right? Is that if you're generous or stingy with no money, you're just going to be really generous or really stingy when you've got money, right? And the other element, which is kind of tricky, is that once you make some money, sometimes what happens is you get a little lazy, don't you? And there's enough money every month to pay the rent and to pay the bills, and the cars are paid, and everything. There's food on the table, and then you just kind of get loose with the rest, don't you?
Exactly. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories we see that people make a lot of money over a few years, and they spend everything they made, and then their business either goes down or their occupation is phased out, and they're broke. And
so if you're listening to the show, you're not going to be one of those. So,
exactly.
So what are some great tools that you've got for those folks who want to do a little better in next year?
Well, the easiest one would be to set up a budget for yourself. Take a look at your expenses, anywhere from your household expenses to your entertainment, car expenses, insurance, kids, food, etc. And you could do this with different types of software out there. Mm-hmm. You know, QuickBooks, Quicken are not that expensive. It takes, behavior modification. It takes, especially if you have a family and a spouse, it takes both to be committed to it. And it's basically reporting everything that you've been spending money on. It's every time you go out, you get the receipt, and then once a week you enter into your system, and you take a look at what you're spending money on, and it's enlightening to see how much you're spending going out to eat or things that you don't need. And then at that point, you would, set some goals for yourself. So let's say we want to, say you're renting, you want to buy a house. How am I going to come up with the down payment? We talked about the IRAs. The IRAs allow you to take $10,000 out without penalty for a first-time home buyer. So along with that, you could start socking away money every month for that down payment, if it's a vacation or whatever it may be. But a lot of it, like I mentioned, is behavior modification. If you're a spender, and there's a lot of people out there, it's just the way it is, different ways you could control that. You could open up different bank accounts, and one bank account is a forced savings account, which we don't touch. The other bank account is to pay your household bills, and another bank account is to pay just spendable income, disposable income.
And the wisdom of keeping those things separate from one another, it should be obvious, but why?
Well, again, it's behavior modification. It's, if you try to quit smoking or do things in life, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work, and you just have to set up the tools to be able to be successful at it. You don't want to set yourself up to fail and say, okay, I'm going to do this, but don't have the tools to do it. So again, this would be one way to do it, is set up a budget. Another part of taking a look at yourself is what you call as a net worth statement. And net worth statement is basically just taking a look at all your assets. That's going to be your cash in the bank, securities, pension, real estate that you own.
Otherwise known, and I'm sure my ESPN folks will love this, as scoreboard.
That's a good one. Exactly.
It's called scoreboard, right?
Exactly. And then you subtract that all your liabilities, credit cards, mortgages, and then you put that away. Put that away for a year. And then you pick up the following year and see how I did. And that correlates with setting goals for yourself. So
and that's another big piece, too, which is almost something that could easily be overlooked, which is it's not just about, like, Facebook, internet, the clicks and flicks. Everything is always about future pacing, future tense. But there's just as much catharsis in going back and taking inventory of how far you've come. Not just because that's a happiness thing, but also because that's where the truth lives. So you're not manifesting the story that you're just telling yourself because it sounds convenient, like, oh, next year I'll do better. Well, how much better did you actually do this year? And then taking a true inventory and saying, here are some of the gaps so that I can help manage those gaps to get better.
Exactly. There was just a study done by MIT, and they basically tracked, children that were less than 10 years old all the way for 30 years. And that study talked about deferred gratification. They would put out things on a table for these young kids, like a marshmallow, and they say, if you don't touch it, I'll give you two of them.
Yeah. I've heard this one.
Exactly. And some kids obviously just couldn't resist, and the other kids that would find different ways to distract themselves and not eat that second marshmallow. Well, they took that study 30 years for those kids that didn't touch that marshmallow and tracked their success rate. And it's been a fact that deferred gratification results in a lot more financially successful people. And deferred gratification is what we were talking about. If you're having a good year, don't go out and just spend it, buy a new car or go on a fancy vacation. Try to put some of that money away for the future.
And it'll also keep you off of TMZ.
Exactly.
Which is a lesser-known element of that, which could be equally beneficial.
It depends. If you're Kardashian, you want to be on TMZ.
Well, hey, I rest my case. But the truth is, and this is something I think that, like we could easily kind of blast people, sort of like we did in the first and second segments about all the different things. And I love the thought that we've got those all in PDF so that you can slowly, in your own time and dime, download what the year-end tax plan is going to mean for you for business and personal by going to thegreenhousegroupinc.com/year-end tax plan and downloading that form for yourself. But when it comes to this, it's almost, I feel like, slowing down is a critical part of this. Like, you can speed this up really quick and you can kind of take that drink from the fire hose. But when we talk about a quick analysis for yourself and we talk about putting it into budgets, what's your favorite tool? Like you mentioned Quicken. And it's also kind of a context for me that people say that's a little too complicated for the average Joe, and which really it's not, but it just requires you, a little bit more of a commitment to actually run that thing and have it working for you. Are there any other tools that are a little easier, a little more 101, you might say, that you can point people in the direction of?
Well, there's Excel sheets. If, you could put all that information on an Excel sheet, you would just list all your expenses, and then you'd have columns what you're spending the money on. And if Excel is even too complicated for you, you could do that manually. You just go to the stationery store and get like 14-column paper and just start writing that down. Yeah. And once you start doing it and you start, getting that behavior modification in place, you end up enjoying it. You see results and you feel good about yourself. You get some good self-esteem and accolades, and hopefully your partner is behind it. And before you know it, you see results. It doesn't take a long time to really see those results.
I think what you're saying is brilliant, and I'll also make a recommendation for folks. And I'm not by any way endorsing this company, beside just the personal experience that I used it, is a free web tool called mint.com, which is actually tied to the back end of some of those tools that you're talking about already. And what makes that what made that thing a great 101 for me was not just that it was free, but it totally incorporated everything I was already doing and then gave me like algorithms to be able to sort of go, blah, 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 blah. Okay, here's where you sit. And one of the really cool features was it let me kind of know where I sit with other people in my area. Because, it's like if measuring me against someone in Detroit, Michigan is tough because our cost of living is so different. There's all kinds of different metrics. But measuring somebody of my own age group, of my own marital status, and in the same city is actually helpful. So, like, I remember when I first started that, the very first thing I saw was that my restaurants was through the roof. So I was eating out way too much, and that was killing me. And so that was a great little barometer. I could look at that and say, man, I got a real parse back on my restaurants here, and I was doing good in this, and I was doing this, but I was just getting killed in this. And so having those kind of free tools available for you, and then you can even plug in your credit cards if you feel comfortable enough to do that, and it looks at all your spending and tracks it for you and all that stuff. And then another thing which was important is everybody's heard of Dave Ramsey, right? The Financial Peace, I think, was his seminal book. He talks about working in cash, and he actually has like this concept of. Have you read the Financial Peace book?
No, but I'm familiar with him.
Right. You don't have to have read it to be familiar with it.
In fact, a friend of mine, Warren Thuff, I'll give a shout out to. He's their CPA as far as they refer business on his talk show.
He's got a whole got a whole thing around that. But do you coach that at all? Like people sort of working in cash to get their hands wrapped around the management of money?
I believe in doing whatever it takes. I've seen and I've worked with people that the best thing would be every week or twice a week, take a $300, $500 ATM withdrawal, and that's your spendable income. Everything else is tied to fixed fees that you have to pay, and then the excess obviously is savings or paying down old debt. But absolutely, if that works for you, you have to be open to see what works for you. It's not a cookie cutter. Everybody's different. And at the same time, you don't want to restrict yourself. If you're going to restrict yourself and never eat out again or never buy another piece of clothes, it's never going to work. So you have to be realistic in what you're trying to accomplish. And it's setting goals. I mean, part of this time of year is to set goals. I mean, I've done it every year for the last 30 years, and those goals aren't only financial. It's just goals in general about the family, about your kids, about, different parts of your life, and this is just the best time of the year to do that, and part of that are financial goals.
And it's also the greatest time in our existence to get help with things like automation. Like I think you were talking brilliantly earlier about having different accounts set up for different goals, and then, you set it and you forget it, right? So you can literally have, with automation tools, you can have it draw right off your paycheck so you don't even see it, and it can go into accounts that aren't meant to be managed, not like your primary checking or savings account with like, your local financial institution like Wells Fargo or B of A or whatever. These are like online savings accounts, and you can actually variate your goals, like down payment for our first house, right? Vacation, kids' school, all that stuff. And it just goes in there, and then you never even think about it. And I love that suggestion.
Exactly.
Are there any online banks that you see right now that work better than others, or they're offering higher yields?
Well, there's no yields out there, so forget that. But that's how the 401ks work. If you're an employee, it's forced savings. I mean, what Jesse said is exactly correct. Out of sight, out of mind. And you just have to, take the first step and say, okay, X amount's going to go into my 401. I'm not going to see it. And 30 years from now, I'll be happy I did it. And the same with the other savings accounts, is you just put it away, forget about it. And people tend to spend what's in front of them. If they don't have the money in front of them, they won't spend it. If they have it, they will.
And you need a plan to execute first, which is why you got to have a man in your corner with the caliber of Stephen Wendroff. Stephen, you're killing it right now. I mean, this is incredible. Hopefully it's incredible for you, Stash Nation, as it is for me listening to it live right now. Track down Stephen at stevewcpa.com, or you can call him at 619-295-2637. So let's do this. Coming up, we'll do some final thoughts. I know you got some important shout-outs you want to do, and then we'll put a nice little holiday bow ribbon around the year-end tax planning strategy sesh with my man Stephen Wendroff right after this. Real Talk Radio San Diego.